If you like ghost stories filled with strange presences, unexplained phenomena, and encounters that defy logic, stick around. Because what you're about to hear might shake everything you believe in, like the story you're about to see, where a family in Alabama starts noticing strange signs after a massive hole appears out of nowhere, and whatever came out of it doesn't seem willing to leave. But before we get into the story, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any terrifying tales, and let me know down in the comments what city or country you're watching this from. You could see the dust rising from the dirt road before you even heard the rumble of the engines. That wasn't normal. No trucks had passed through here in months. We lived in a remote part of Alabama. Too remote, some might say. Just me, my husband, and our 2 young kids. The peace of the place was what made it all worth it. Or at least that's what I used to think. That morning, the sky was clear, not a cloud in sight. Then the trucks appeared out of nowhere. 5 or 6 of them, all hauling dark, almost black soil. None of them stopped to ask questions. None of the drivers even glanced our way. They headed straight for the empty field on the other side of the fence, right by the tree line. The noise was constant, engines roaring, metal clanging, short honks. But there was no foreman, no signs, no indication this was any kind of official work. My husband tried to strike up a conversation with one of the drivers, but the guy just pointed forward and muttered, "Following orders." That was it. Then he went back to fiddling with his radio like we weren't even there. Something about the way he said it sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't just the rudeness, it was the cold, mechanical tone. Over the next few days, the trucks kept coming and going, always dumping more soil in the same spot. Then, just as suddenly, they stopped. No warning, no explanation. When we went to check it out, we found a massive hole in the ground. Not the kind you dig for a foundation. This was deeper than anything I'd ever seen. And the strangest part? The soil they'd brought in. It looked like it had never been used. It was just piled up on the sides, as if the goal had never been to build anything at all. I got this uneasy feeling, like something down there had woken up. At night, I started hearing strange noises coming from the direction of the hole. Not animal sounds, not machinery. Something heavier, thicker, like the ground itself was breathing. My husband said it was all in my head, but even he started avoiding that field after dark. A few weeks later, symbols began appearing near the house. Marks on the ground, made from stones, branches, even small bones. They looked like ritual drawings, the kind of thing you only see in movies. I asked the kids if they'd done it, just messing around, but they swore they hadn't. And the way they looked when they said it, I believed them. Slowly, the kids stopped playing outside. They claimed they saw figures at the edge of the woods, tall, thin, with glowing green eyes. At first, I thought it was their imagination. Kids see things, right? But then our dogs started acting strange too. They'd get restless every night, barking at nothing, trembling, trying to hide under the house. One time, I found one of them scratching desperately at the back door, like something outside was trying to get in. I started waking up in the middle of the night with the feeling of being watched. It wasn't ordinary fear. It was like some kind of presence was standing in the dark corner of the room, staring. A heavy, negative energy hung in the air. Lights flickered for no reason. The TV turned on by itself, tuning to channels that didn't even exist anymore. One night I saw something through the crack in the window. A shadow, slow and massive, dragging itself toward the house. It looked like it was covered in roots, with arms too long for its body. The next morning I found drag marks in the mud, right there on the porch. That same week I heard wood creaking under the house. I thought it was an animal, but it didn't sound like light paws running. It was more like footsteps, heavy, like something big was crawling underneath, scraping against the support beams. I grabbed a flashlight and forced myself to look, even though I was shaking. That's when I saw it. A creature standing in the shadows. It looked like a tree, but alive. Its skin was cracked bark, and its deep-set eyes glowed from within. It didn't move. It just stared at me. My breath caught in my throat. I stood there frozen, the flashlight trembling in my hand, unable to scream, unsure if I was awake or dreaming. I ran back inside and locked every door. After that, I tried not to talk about what I'd seen. I thought if I gave it a name, if I tried to explain it, I might call it back, but it didn't matter. The next night I heard my husband's voice calling me from outside. His voice, but low, wrong. When I opened the door, no one was there, just the quiet forest, and that same feeling. Something was out there, waiting. I closed the door slowly, trying to ignore it, but the voice came back, again and again, always calling my name in my husband's calm tone. But he was asleep in bed, and I knew it. I looked out the window and saw a silhouette standing between the trees, like it was waiting for me to come closer. It felt like a trap, something mimicking someone I loved, trying to lure me into the woods. The next morning I told him everything, the thing under the house, the voice in the night. He was quiet for a long time, just staring at the kitchen table. Then he spoke softly, as if he was afraid to hear his own conclusion. I heard it too. He said he'd gotten up one night for water and heard our daughter calling for help, but when he checked her room, she was fast asleep. That's when he started to believe this was something deeper. We tried to go on like normal. We avoided looking at the field, kept the kids inside, and prayed for it to pass. But it was like the energy of the land had changed. Everything felt heavier, grayer. Even the wind through the trees sounded different, like something was whispering inside it. It wasn't paranoia, it was physical. A weight on my shoulders, like we were carrying an invisible burden ever since that hole appeared. One warm night, I woke up to a strong smell in the air, sweet and rotten, like spoiled fruit mixed with rust. When I checked the hallway, the front door was slightly ajar. I knew I'd locked it before bed. I tiptoed forward, my heart pounding, and when I got close to the door, I heard footsteps outside, slow, dragging. I peeked through the crack and saw that tall, bark-covered figure again, walking in circles in the field. It stopped, turned its head toward me, and smiled. Its mouth looked carved into wood, full of cracks and teeth that didn't belong. It wasn't human. I ran back to the bedroom and stayed there until dawn. That same week, the trucks returned. No warning, no sound of arrival. We woke up to the rumble of engines outside just like before. But this time they were filling the hole. They dumped soil non-stop as if they were sealing something in. No foremen, no blueprints, no government workers. Just drivers with downcast eyes pouring layer after layer of dark soil into the void. It lasted 3 days. Then they vanished, just like before. When it was over, the field looked normal. The marks were gone. The strange smell was gone. The kids played in the yard again. The dog stopped trembling and the silence returned. But I knew it wasn't the same silence as before. Since then, no one's talked about the creature. Not the voices, not the green eyes, not the heavy nights. We pretended it was all a collective nightmare. But every time I pass by the kitchen window and look at the field, I feel like there's something down there, waiting, buried, but not dead. My husband planted grass over it, like that could erase what happened. And during the day, it almost looks normal. But at night, when everything is quiet and the wind blows colder, I hear it again. The house creaking, the ground vibrating slightly like something is moving down there, trying to remember the way back up. I've never seen the creature again, but sometimes I feel like it's watching me through the walls. Like that supernatural experience left a bond, an invisible connection between me and it. There are nights I wake up at the same time I first heard the voice, and even with everything silent, the doors locked and the windows shut, I'm absolutely certain there's someone outside standing at the edge of the forest, calling my name. And one day, maybe I'll answer. Creepy, right? What did you think of that story? On a scale from 0 to 10, what score would you give it? Drop your opinion in the comments. And the scariest part, no one ever figured out what was really buried there. But sometimes terror doesn't rise from the ground. It walks right beside us, or at least it seems to. Like in the next story, where a man discovers there might be 2 versions of himself walking around, and one of them isn't human. Have you ever gotten that weird feeling when you see someone you know, but something's just off? like they're right there in front of you, but there's something about them that sends a chill down your spine. A strange energy, an absence of presence. I don't know how else to describe it. That's kind of how it all started with Rob. Or rather, with the other Rob. The building where we worked was already creepy on its own. 3 stories built in the 1940s with wooden floors that creaked even when no one was walking. It felt like at any moment, someone from another era might just appear. Some guy in an old suit and fedora. The place had a vibe, like it was holding on to things. And I'm not talking about old furniture or forgotten files. I'm talking about energy. A presence. The office crew used to joke that the top floor was haunted. Every now and then, someone would hear voices up there when it was supposed to be empty. A whisper here, muffled laughter there, and always that cold prickle crawling up your back. But nobody took it seriously. It was just another coffee break joke. Then came Force Friday. If you're not familiar, it's this big nerd event where new Star Wars merch drops. Rob was obsessed. He had a lightsaber collection, action figures, themed t-shirts, the kind of guy who turned into a kid on launch day. That Friday, I got to the office early. The sky was still dark, that damp autumn morning air hanging heavy. As I went to unlock the front door, I saw someone climbing the internal stairs. It was Rob. I thought it was odd because he usually arrived after me. Even weirder, his outfit. He was wearing a dark leather jacket I'd never seen before, ripped jeans and red sneakers. The Rob I knew was always put together. Polo shirts, dress pants, the whole 9 yards. I called out, "Rob!" But he didn't even turn around. Just kept climbing, slow, like he was in a trance. I tried to rush inside to catch up, but the door jammed in this bizarre way, like someone was holding it shut from the other side. By the time I got it open and ran upstairs, the top floor was completely empty. I checked every room. Nothing, no noise, no sign anyone had been there. About 10 minutes later, I heard the front door open. It was Rob, the real Rob. Same old outfit, backpack slung over his shoulder, laughing, talking about the new Kylo Ren figure he'd just scored. I just stared at him, not sure what to say. I asked if he'd been there earlier, pulling some kind of prank. He swore he hadn't, said he'd just left his house. Even showed me the timestamp on his phone. We searched the whole building, found nothing, no footprints, nothing out of place, no unlocked doors. Just that uncomfortable silence and the feeling of being watched. We brushed it off after a while. One of those weird things you file away in your brain and move on from. But then it happened again. Months later, Rob came down with a nasty flu, the kind that knocks you flat. He messaged the group chat saying he'd be out for a few days. Fine. But that morning I went to grab a folder from the conference room and, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him sitting at his desk, shuffling papers like he was working normally. I stood there for a second, confused. Wait, isn't he sick in bed? I walked in and he vanished just like that, like he'd never been there. I thought maybe it was a trick of the light, a reflection, but I called him. He answered, voice all nasally, coughing, saying he was wrapped in a blanket and hadn't left his bed yet. I showed him the photo I'd taken of his empty desk. Nothing. But I swear, I saw him there, in the flesh, moving papers, just like always. Only he didn't say a word, and his eyes, distant, hollow. After that, more people started reporting similar things. Carol from HR said she saw Rob climbing the stairs late one afternoon, but he'd already left hours earlier. Lucas swore he passed him in the hallway, but Rob didn't respond to his good night, just walked straight past, not looking at anyone. And here's the creepiest part. No one ever saw the other Rob face to face, always from behind, or from the side, or just a quick glimpse. He never spoke, never interacted, just appeared, walked, or stood there and disappeared without a trace. The final straw was when Wade, our project manager, the guy who's all logic, no nonsense, saw him with his own eyes. He was leaving late one night and saw Rob standing at the top of the stairs. Thought he was waiting for someone. But when Wade went up, no one was there. He asked in the group chat where Rob was, and guess what? Rob was at home, holding his kid, and sent a photo to prove it. After that, we couldn't ignore it anymore. We started calling it the other Rob, It wasn't just a coincidence. There was a pattern, an entity, maybe. A copy that always appeared the same way. Silent, turned away, moving slowly, vanishing into thin air. Little by little, everyone started avoiding the third floor. No one wanted to go up there alone. The energy in the building got heavier, thicker, like the place was absorbing something. A memory, a shadow, a version of Rob that wasn't Rob anymore, but didn't want to leave. Sometimes I catch myself wondering, what if the other Rob isn't the only one? What if we all have a reflection like that out there? A part of us that split off in a moment of distraction, or got stuck in a place where negative energy builds up. Have we already seen our other self and just didn't realize it? Ever since I switched to remote work, I haven't set foot in that building. But there are nights when I close my eyes and I can still see it. That silhouette standing at the top of the stairs. Faceless, silent, watching without seeing. Like it knows that I know. And the worst part? I'm not sure it was just happening with Rob. Bizarre, right? After seeing something that looked like your own copy, you start to wonder, how many other presences could be lurking in everyday places? The next story takes place in an old jewelry store, where objects move on their own. Voices come out of nowhere, and not even an exorcism was enough to explain it all. You could feel the energy shift the moment you turned the corner onto Main Street. It wasn't something you could put into words, but it was like time itself had gotten stuck in some strange pocket of history. The old storefronts, the wrought iron lampposts, the uneven cobblestones. Everything in Larne, that little coastal town in Northern Ireland, seemed steeped in the past, and not the kind of past you read about on brass plaques or hear on guided tours. I'm talking about something else, the kind of feeling that you're being watched when no one's around, the kind where you hear the echo of your own footsteps, even when you're walking on carpet. I worked for nearly 2 years in a men's clothing shop right downtown, just a stone's throw from the docks. The shop was 2 doors down from Pollock's Jewelry, one of those places with dark wood display cases, thick glass, and a gold leaf sign that had seen better days. I always thought it looked like something out of an old movie. The window was filled with opaque gemstone necklaces, pocket watches on velvet cushions, and a rotating ring display that creaked every time it turned. Customers rarely went in, but the shop endured, quiet and steady, like one of those trees nobody notices until it's been there 100 years. The strange thing was, over time I started to notice that locals avoided walking too close to the jewelry store. Sometimes they'd give it a wide berth. Other times they'd pick up the pace. When I asked why, some just laughed nervously, while others would mutter, "Best not to mess with that." It wasn't until I'd been working there for months that I found out most people thought Pollock's was haunted. My curiosity only grew when I started seeing an elderly woman with snowy white hair pulled into a tight bun, arriving at the same time every day to unlock the shop with an enormous key on a chain. One day I pushed open the door to return a delivery that had been mistakenly left at our store. The air inside was thick, a mix of old silver, polished wood, and something else, something heavier, like the air itself was denser. The woman's name was Margaret, and while she was polite, her eyes were distant, as if she carried the weight of too many sleepless nights. It was Margaret herself who casually mentioned that things in the shop weren't quite right. She told me that when she was alone, she'd hear knocking from the basement, even when no one was down there. Objects moved on their own overnight. Once, an entire set of sapphire earrings vanished from a locked drawer, only to reappear stacked on the desk upstairs. The security cameras never caught anything. The system would glitch at the exact moment the strange events happened. And the worst part, she said, was the constant feeling of being watched. After that conversation, I started paying closer attention. And I swear, there was something off about that street. Even with the hustle and bustle outside, the silence inside the shop felt forced, like the walls were swallowing sound on purpose. It wasn't long before my own store started experiencing the fallout. We'd hear sharp knocks from the stockroom, especially at night. At first, we thought it was the pipes, but there weren't any back there. Then the hangers started moving on their own, first swaying gently, then spinning as if invisible fingers were brushing past them. One time, we locked up the shop, And when we came back the next morning, some of the shirts were neatly folded on the counter in a way none of us had done. The cameras, again, showed nothing. But the worst was when I noticed the reflection in the display window sometimes showed someone standing behind me. And when I turned, no one was there. And it wasn't just me. The manager, the stock clerk, even the delivery guy all complained about sudden chills and that same feeling of being watched. It was like a dark energy seeping through the cracks of the street. Things took a turn for the worse when Margaret's son started helping out at the shop. He was in his early 30s, seemed skeptical but friendly. But almost as soon as he started spending time there, he showed up with strange marks on his arms. He said he'd scratched himself in the basement, but the cuts didn't look like anything I'd ever seen. Thin, parallel, deep. Then came the bites. Yes, bites. He swore he felt someone grab his wrist when he went down the stairs, and no one was there. Margaret tried to brush it off as stress or exhaustion, but everything came to a head when a display case full of lighters crashed to the floor in the middle of the afternoon, nearly hitting a customer. The camera showed the items flying forward, as if shoved by an unseen force. At that point, she was truly scared. She couldn't pretend it was all in her head anymore. That's when she decided to call for help. Not a technician or a cop, but a priest. They said he came from Belfast, specializing in unusual situations. When he arrived with his stern expression and a crucifix around his neck, the atmosphere on the street had already shifted. It felt colder. Still, the jewelry store's window looked fogged from the inside, even though no one was there. What happened inside Pollock's that day, it was the kind of supernatural experience no one forgets. And to this day, I wonder if it ever really ended. Because sometimes, when I walk by at night, I swear I see the light upstairs flickering, and the reflection in the glass. It still looks darker than it should. The priest went in alone, carrying a small leather case and a serious expression that didn't inspire much confidence, but left no room for doubt. We stood outside, silent, watching through the window, too afraid to go in. Margaret clutched a handkerchief, staring at the door as if expecting something to burst out. From inside, we could hear his voice praying, steady but low. And then, it started. First, the lights flickered like the wiring was shorting out, but the cables had just been replaced. Then came a strange dragging sound from upstairs, but no one was up there. Not even Margaret's son had come back to the shop that day. And then came the sound that still sends shivers down my spine just thinking about it. A low, raspy laugh, like it was coming from every corner at once, as if the whole building was laughing at us. The priest kept going, but his voice was shaking. We heard a loud crash, like furniture toppling over, and Margaret tried the door. It was locked from the inside, all by itself. The window trembled, as if something was pounding on the glass from within, and we all instinctively stepped back. No one knew what to do. The silence returned for a few seconds, but it was heavy, the kind that presses down on your chest. When the priest finally emerged, his face was pale, his eyes hollow, and sweat dripped down his temples. He didn't say a word at first. He just made the sign of the cross and handed the case to Margaret. She was trembling but thanked him. We asked what had happened inside, but he only shook his head, as if it wasn't something that could be put into simple words. Later, he told us that during the prayer, a force had slammed him against the wall so hard it cracked the plaster. He said he'd seen the thing's face for a second, a mix of human features and something he swore he'd never seen before. The eyes were dark, hollow, and the face looked wrong, like it had been stretched from the inside out. And then came the voice. It wasn't human, it was guttural, rough, speaking in a language he couldn't identify. But one word kept repeating, and he wrote it down. Belra. He said he thought it was a name, or a warning. After that day, things changed. The atmosphere inside Pollock's felt lighter, at least for a while. The lights stopped flickering. The objects stayed in place. Margaret's son, who had stopped coming to the shop after the attacks, started helping her again, though still with caution. She kept a crucifix behind the counter and a small jar of coarse salt near the window. Just in case, she'd say, half joking, half serious. But not everything went back to normal. The security camera in the office never worked right again. It would glitch at random times, recording nothing but static, even after replacing the equipment. And the reflection in the glass, that shadowy reflection, was still there. Every time the shop closed, you could see a dark figure standing behind the counter, motionless. We tested it with flashlights, angles, even security mirrors. It wasn't an ordinary shadow. As months passed, the story spread through town. Some avoided the street entirely. Others would stop in front of the shop and just stare. Outsiders didn't notice anything. But the locals, they felt it. The spiritual presence lingering there might have weakened, but it hadn't left. It was like something had been swept under the rug, but it could rise again at any moment. Some say the priest managed to seal it temporarily. Others think he only made whatever was there angrier. The fact is, Margaret still shows up every day at the same time, her bun tight, the key around her neck. But she aged quickly after that day. Deep circles under her eyes and a weary look betray the fact that not all her nights are peaceful. Pollock's is still open. It still sells rings, antique watches, silver necklaces. But those of us who work on that street know it's not over. The dark energy still pulses inside, even if it's weaker now. And there are days in the late afternoon when the mist rolls in and covers the window that you can hear knocking, coming from the basement. And in those moments, everyone remembers what the priest said before he left. Some doors should never be opened, but once opened, they never close all the way. Pretty terrifying, huh? And if even an exorcism can't drive certain things away, maybe it's because they're not tied to a place but to the person who encounters them. That seems to be the case in the next story, where a simple farmhouse becomes the stage for eerie whistles, dead animals, and the constant feeling that something or someone is watching. But before we move on with the story, if you've made it this far, it means you're enjoying these tales. So go ahead and hit that like button to let YouTube know you want more creepy content and never miss another horror story. The first night I slept at my aunt's place, I dreamed of a broken fence in the middle of the woods and a faceless man calling to me with a whistle. It was only supposed to be a short stay on the farm. My aunt needed help after her husband passed, and I was in one of those lost phases of life, you know. Fresh out of college, no steady job, just wanting to breathe somewhere far from the city. So I went. Southwest Saskatchewan, an isolated farm half an hour from the nearest town, surrounded by open fields and that feeling like time moved slower there. I thought I'd find peace, but that's not how it went. From day one, something felt off about that house. Nothing I could put my finger on, just a feeling, like I was being watched. A heaviness in the air. And it wasn't just my aunt's grief, though she never talked about her husband. It was like the whole house had soaked up something dark, something that clung to your skin. The first week I tried to ignore it. I kept busy with farm chores, helped with the animals, cleaned the barns, cooked meals. My dog Max was always by my side, racing through the fields, barking at squirrels, dodging the roosters. But at night he changed. He'd get restless, pacing in circles by the door. And if I tried to take him outside after dark, he'd freeze. He'd let out a low growl like he saw something out there that I couldn't. My aunt said it was coyotes, but Max had faced down coyotes before. This was different. His eyes were wide, his ears flat, his breathing shallow. I felt it too, a creeping dread that grew stronger as the sun dipped below the cornfield. One rainy night around midnight, Max started whining at the door. He needed to go out, and I wasn't about to let him make a mess inside. I threw on a jacket, grabbed a flashlight, and followed him out back. The rain fell in a fine mist, the sound of droplets blending with the distant croak of frogs in the marsh. Max did his business by a bush, and I was just about to call him back when I heard it. A whistle, sharp, close. I stopped dead, turned slowly, shining the flashlight into the tall grass behind the barn. Nothing. At first I thought it was an owl, but then it came again, closer, and wrong. It sounded like someone trying to mimic a human whistle but getting it all wrong at the end. Max growled. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. Then, through the rain, I heard the voice. A man's voice, rough and raspy, like it had been torn from the throat of someone who hadn't spoken in weeks. It repeated the same word, a whisper thick with anger. Go, go, go. I froze. Max barked and bolted for the house. I stumbled after him, my heart pounding, slipping in the mud. I locked every door and left every light on. I slept with the TV blaring like a kid trying to scare off the boogeyman. The next morning, my aunt was off, quieter than usual. When I mentioned the noise, she just said, "Out here, there's a lot you learn to ignore." Then she walked off to feed the pigs like she hadn't just dropped a cryptic bomb on me. But what really chilled me to the bone was what we found in the pasture. 2 calves, dead, no visible wounds, eyes wide, bodies bloated, dark foam crusted around their nostrils. The vet figured it was some kind of natural poison from the plants, but my aunt, she knew better. When she came back from the field, she went straight to her room and locked the door. That night was the last straw. The next day I packed my bags and left, took Max and headed for British Columbia. I thought I was leaving it all behind, that it was just the place, the house. But I was wrong. The new place was a small town, way more populated. A rented wooden cabin with neighbors nearby, trees all around, and a much lighter vibe. For a while, everything seemed normal. Too normal. Then the signs started. Max began acting strange at night again. He'd stand at the back door, staring into nothing. Sometimes he'd growl, sometimes he'd shake. And one night, while I was brushing my teeth, I heard it again. That whistle. I nearly dropped my toothbrush. I stood perfectly still, listening, and there it was again. Longer, closer. I went to the kitchen window, looked out into the yard, nothing. But the feeling came back. That prickling sensation of being watched. A cold shiver crawling up my spine. I shut the curtains and slept with the lights on again. The next day, my upstairs neighbor knocked on my door. An older guy named Nathan, who rented the top floor of the cabin. He was pale, with deep bags under his eyes. Said someone had left a chunk of raw meat wrapped in an old rag on his doorstep. He thought it was a sick prank, but the smell, it was like something had been dead for days. I went up with him and the rag was still there. It was meat, all right. But the weirdest part? There were bite marks in it, human bite marks. After that, the nightmares started. Always the same scene. Me running through an open field, someone whistling behind me. Sometimes Max was pulling me along. Other times it was a child I'd never seen. And the voice, that same voice, "Go, go," I told my boyfriend. He tried to reassure me. Just stress, just trauma from the move. But the next week he woke up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, gasping. Said he'd dreamed of someone locking him in a barn, shouting the same command, "Go." Things got worse. Max refused to go outside at night at all. He'd hide under the bed. I started hearing footsteps in the hallway when I was alone, lights flickering, the radio turning on by itself. And the scariest part? I found a makeshift fence in the backyard, rusted wire and sticks arranged in a circle. In the center, a feather caked in dried blood. I don't know what it was, but I know it followed me. Maybe it wasn't the house that was haunted. Maybe it was the land, or the fields, or me. Whatever was in that forgotten farm in southern Saskatchewan decided to come with me. And now, even in another province, surrounded by people with neighbors and lights and cell service, I still hear it. The whistle. And it's getting closer. Spooky, right? What did you think of that one? From 0 to 10, what score would you give it? Share your thoughts in the comments. The first time I saw him, I could barely even talk. But I never forgot that face, or, well, what he had instead of one. I must have been 2, maybe 3 years old. My parents, my grandparents, and I all lived in this old trailer. The kind that creaks and sways in the wind like it's barely holding itself together. We didn't have much, but to a little kid, the whole world fit in that cramped kitchen, smelling of stale coffee and peeling linoleum floors. I remember the taste of my grandma's applesauce and banana mash like it was yesterday. I'd sit in my little wooden high chair every day, spooning it down while staring at the front door. She'd be there, stirring something on the stove with her wooden spoon. And that's when it all started. The door was shut. But then I felt it, a cold knot in my stomach, goosebumps crawling up my arms. And when I looked again, he was there, just standing, staring right at me. Tall, too tall. His skin was dark as coal, but wrong. Not like ours. Like it wasn't made of the same stuff. His eyes, they glowed. Not a reflection, not a trick of the light. A deep, pulsing red. And that hat. Not a top hat, not a fedora. More like an old fisherman's cap, worn out, crooked, the brim pulled low. He didn't say a word, just watched me. The longer I looked, the tighter my chest got, like some primal part of me was screaming to run, even though I didn't know why. Then he did something I still can't explain. He raised his hand and waved, slow, like he was saying goodbye or marking me. Then he turned and walked out. The door never opened. He just passed through it. Of course, I told my mom, in that messy kid way you do. She laughed it off, said it was my imagination. My grandpa said little kids see things, not to worry about it. But I was never the same after that. Some nights I'd wake up crying, feeling him there, standing at the foot of my bed, just watching. We moved not long after. My parents split, and Mom met someone new. That's when we started fresh in a bigger house way out in the sticks. The place was nice but isolated, surrounded by woods and a long dirt path. At night it was pitch black. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. And that's where the fear came back for good. One of the chores I hated most was taking the trash to the end of the path. It was too far, too dark, too quiet. Even with a flashlight, I always felt like something was lurking. Like the woods were watching every step I took. And the sounds. There was always this noise coming from underground. Not an animal, not the wind, something dragging. Like it was digging. There's one night I'll never forget. I must have been 8. It was cold, the sky thick with clouds. Mom told me to take out the trash before bed. I complained, but I didn't have a choice. I grabbed the flashlight and went. Every step felt like something was pulling me back. The bushes rustled, even though there wasn't a breeze. The crickets had gone silent. And the dogs, they were acting strange that night. Instead of barking, they growled. Low, vicious, their fur standing on end, like they saw something I couldn't. I tried to hurry, but then I heard it. A snap from the woods followed by that sound again, something moving beneath the earth. And then he was there. That same feeling from years ago, like I was being studied, measured. My flashlight started flickering. And then I saw it, a shadow, tall, wearing that slouched hat, standing between the trees. I froze, couldn't move. My heart was pounding, the dogs howling now. The figure didn't move, just watched. And I knew, even after all those years, even though I'd never seen him again, it was the Hat Man. I dropped the trash and ran, burst through the door, shaking, crying, trying to explain. But Mom didn't believe me, said I was being dramatic. My stepdad was furious, yelled at me, called me lazy, said I needed to learn to listen. I ended up grounded, locked in my room, no dinner. None of that mattered, because the fear that took root in me that night, it never left. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him, felt that dark energy hanging in the air, like he was always nearby, waiting for the right moment. I don't know why, I don't know what he wants. I stopped talking about it eventually. People get tired of hearing it. They think it's made up, a childhood trauma, a bad dream. But I know what I saw, I know what I felt, and that sense of being watched, it never went away. Even now, as an adult, I still have nightmares about him. Still wake up in the middle of the night convinced someone's standing in the hallway. And sometimes, when I pass a window or glance in a mirror, I see it. A reflection, a shape, a slow wave. And I know, he's still following me. And if you still get chills walking alone in the dark, maybe now you know why. If you enjoyed today's stories, make sure you hit subscribe. There's always something new coming. And it'll be great to have you back for more of these haunting tales that stick in your head. Oh, and if you stayed with me until the very end, Drop a comment saying "The Man in the Hat." Only those who made it here will get it. Don't forget to leave a like too. It really helps us keep bringing you more strange, bizarre, and sometimes even real stories. There's another video right here that ties in with this one. Click and keep going with me over there. But fair warning, it'll be hard to sleep after that one too.